Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook video for today, Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. Let's get started with the National Hurricane Center homepage to see what is going on right now. And in the Atlantic, nothing expected of development in the next 48 hours. And as well, that remains the case over the next week. In the Eastern Pacific, on the other hand, there is an area of interest, Invest 92E. This is not looking like it is very likely to develop. However, it does have a medium chance, but I'll show you that there is some sort of potential that we might not see this form. Although this does have a decent shot. I shouldn't have said that this is not likely to form, but it does have a decent shot. 40% chance over the next week of potential formation. But the good part about it is that it'll stay well offshore, away from the Mexican coastline, and well off into the Eastern Pacific. Here's a true color shot of the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific so we could get a view of 92E. You can see it all the way in the left corner of the satellite. You can see that there's a little bit of a circulation involved with this storm. But the biggest thing is that it does seem very broad, and look to the northwest of 92E is a lot of these low level kind of feathery clouds. This is indicative of a lots of dry air that is just to the northwest of it, and it'll probably be an inhibiting factor over the next several days as it slowly continues off to the west and then to the northwest. So it's still quite a concern, question whether or not we will see 92E develop right now, but it is not a concern, especially for land impacts, because once again, it is well off away from any sort of coastline in sight. In the Atlantic, on the other hand, not much going on. Atlantic is also pretty quiet too. Not much cloud cover throughout the Caribbean or even the Gulf of Mexico, and this is really helping to warm the Gulf up quite a bit, and I'll show you in the sea surface temperature anomalies in just a moment. The Gulf is definitely warming up quite a bit. The Atlantic as a whole remains very much above normal, but there is lots of Saharan air out there, which you kind of see coming into the frame. And that'll be the inhibiting factor in the Atlantic, at least for the next week or so, at least in terms of deep tropical development. So here's the sea surface temperature anomaly map updated yesterday. This is the NOAA Coral Reef Watch. They always update a day behind, but at least the trade-off is that they update every day. And really quickly, just want to start off in the Eastern Pacific. We do have a pretty warm tropical Eastern Pacific, except along the equatorial Pacific. Obviously, given that we have neutral conditions right now, and we're potentially going to head towards La Nina later on this year. I think we've all already established that pretty solidly. But right around, especially the area, I think you can match it where our Invest 92E is. Definitely pretty warm in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies out there. So this will have warmer waters to work with where it is right now. But once again, as you head just a little bit towards the northwest, we start seeing a little bit of these more average to slightly below average anomalies in the Pacific. Plus, the cutoff for the warm water in the Pacific, it's not like the Atlantic where, for one, the Atlantic is very warm sea surface temperature anomaly wise in the deep tropics, all through the subtropics in the Atlantic maritime region, and the 26 degrees Celsius isotherm extends well off near the Carolinas north of Bermuda as helped by the Gulf Stream. We don't have that case in the Eastern Pacific, so the warm waters tend to be much more confined to the Pacific, and usually things that once they start heading far enough to the west-northwest, they begin to die out as they move towards cooler waters. So this has warmer waters right now to work with, but it'll move towards cooler waters probably in a few days, which will probably work in against it. And we'll obviously see what the models show with that as well in just a moment. But you can see as well on the vorticity, you can see that there's a little bit of vorticity associated with that area. As I showed you on the satellite, there is some spin. It's just obviously about whether or not it does get more organized. But the energy is not quite concentrated yet, so we're not looking at this potentially becoming a formidable system. If anything, this storm is going to stay weak, and once again, away from any land masses of any and cause any sort of consequence. While in the Atlantic too, as I mentioned, lots of dry Saharan air. Nothing really trying to consolidate much in the Atlantic either. Obviously, we have a few of our tropical waves, as to be expected this time of year. But they're not really consolidating. Conditions are not yet really favorable atmospherically for things to really kick off. But trust me, in a few weeks, it'll definitely change. Other than that, all is quiet right now in the Atlantic. And I actually have a map that can kind of illustrate this in some sort of way, at least atmospherically, and that is the velocity potential. Sorry if the map is a little bit small, but we usually talk about velocity potential as rising air or sinking air in the atmosphere, and we usually take a look at the map I show you that kind of shows the time frame, what the velocity potential forecast is several weeks into the future. Well, this map is the current velocity potential, or at least as of 2 days ago. This is the latest map I could find. This is actually by the NOAA Climate Prediction Center. But this illustrates just how the velocity potential setup is in the globe right now. And as I talked about, and I think the same applies to this graph, these brown colors, notice where we are in the Atlantic and the Pacific right now, we have a bunch of these brown shadings or colors, or I guess contours, and that represents sinking air right now. So atmospherically, we're not favored for rising motion, and we're not favored for convective activity, which obviously doesn't really favor much of tropical cyclone development, and that is what we have right now. Where most of the rising air is located is in the Western Pacific, and I think there is actually some potential interest for development to occur in the Western Pacific over the next week. But the bottom line, it is not in our general region of the world right now, and hence that we are not getting anything to develop, anything to consolidate. That is at least as of any concern. And until that rising air makes its way into our general region of the world, which it will in a few weeks, and I'll probably go over that at a later time to not bring it up for this video. But once we start seeing more of these greens migrate their way, MJO, Madden-Julian oscillation, east to west propagation of rising air in the atmosphere, once that makes its way into our part of the world, then we'll start seeing things much more favorable for development in the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific, and especially the Eastern Pacific, given that they've really not gotten much of any sort of development to occur at all so far this year. We only had one named storm there so far, and it looks like as of right now that will probably continue. But once we start seeing conditions more favorable, I would assume there should probably be more development that at least occurs in the Eastern Pacific, and then obviously down the line from that, we'll probably see more stuff occur in the Atlantic. But for right now, and let's just take a look at the GFS to kind of illustrate that, at least over the next week, not much going on in the Atlantic, or at least as of the 12Z model run. Let's take it out all the way to the next 7 days, and nothing. We don't see any sort of vorticity trying to clump together or concentrate. We do have some sort of areas of vorticity, I guess, in the Gulf that looks like some sort of tropical wave may be being reflected on the model, and then it ends up in the Gulf right there. Some past model runs I saw tried to spin this up into something, although that is well beyond the 7-day time frame, so I wouldn't really be concerned about it. Notice how throughout the entire 7-day time frame we have a huge Bermuda high sitting just over the northern MDR, probably keeps the trade strong enough that nothing is really able to develop into anything formidable, and that is how it remains over the next week in the very least. And in the Eastern Pacific as well, as I showed you, as I said before in our past videos, not even the models are that enthusiastic about much occurring in the Eastern Pacific as well. This is Invest 92E, and I'll even show you the GFS. It does try to do something with 92E, at least over the next 2 days. You can see that some sort of concentration does occur. We do see some sort of low pressure that does try to consolidate, but as I'll show you, and as you can see over the next several days after that, it obviously moves further northwest, probably moves into cooler waters, and really isn't able to develop into much. And then as we take it out further than that, some piece of energy, I guess, that the GFS shows, some model runs and some other models do try to develop it. but at least this run of the GFS doesn't. And obviously, over the next week, we could probably say with confidence, some confidence, at least according to the GFS, that both the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific are looking to be on the quiet side for now. So obviously, we don't have much in terms of tropical concerns or threats to the tropics, at least to any land areas, which is the good thing. But I do want to talk about a threat from within, and also more talking about United States weather, since I feel like we really don't talk about it too much. And we should talk about it more, especially now. The threat from within I'm talking about is the heat. And by the way, that's kind of a result of the Bermuda High. It's going to pump in a lot of heat from the south and over widespread areas of the entire eastern United States, at least for the next several days. And you can see that being reflected in what's going on right now. All of these warnings that you see here on the National Weather Service page, these are heat advisories, and notice just how widespread of an area heat advisories are in effect for. And I think there's even some excessive heat warnings as well in effect. I could tell you here in New York City, where I am, that we have a heat advisory in effect. I think temperatures are going to get into the mid to upper 90s. Probably some areas will see hundreds as well. I think some areas, not maybe where I am, but I'm pretty sure definitely within some of these excessive heat warning areas, temperatures are reaching the hundreds. And that obviously is a hazard in terms of heat. It's not flooding rain or heavy or high winds. Well, heavy rain, high winds. But excessive heat is also a hazard, and it is a form of weather that could be fatal as well, especially if you don't take care of yourself. So if you're in a heat advisory or an excessive heat warning area, stay indoors, stay cool, drink lots of water. The typical things that you would do to stay cool. I mean, it is the height of summer after all, so this is not too unexpected, but it is, once again, excessive heat, and it'll probably continue for at least the next several days. But at least we're not talking about tropical concern for right now. Once again, things staying quiet over the next week. But once again, as we get towards next month into August and into the peak of the hurricane season, don't be surprised if things change very quickly and we go from 0 to 100. Sometimes it happens within a week. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. It looks like right now we're taking a little bit longer for things to really pick up. I mean, it is a much needed break after all, especially from Hurricane Beryl, for people to relax, recuperate, and get back on their feet. But don't let your guard down. We still have the rest of hurricane season to go. So with that being said, I'm going to end it off for today. Not much else to go over, but if you did like what you saw today, I would really appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe, share your thoughts as well. Share your thoughts about the rest of hurricane season. If you have any questions, comment them below. I'm very happy to answer them. And that, with that being said as well, stay safe, peace, love, and kindness to you all. Have a great rest of your day, a blessed one as well, and we will talk again tomorrow.